your rights? Do you really know your rights? Well, beginning today, Wild Consumptions will be feeding you the most important medicine you may ever receive. Beginning with the Articles of the Constitution, let us feast on that which really matters. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Today we will be exploring the first of the 10 Bill of Rights: freedom of religion, speech, press, assembly, and petition. The rogue politicians are doing everything possible to remove our God-given rights. I believe you fight suffering by taking a stand against it. And here is a brief message from my sponsor, who helps make this video possible to show you more of how you can take a stand for your health and help support this channel at the same time.
There was a time when I had my head in the sand. Then I found out that power players pass lies for truth and truth for lies, especially in areas of life and health. I used to stay quiet, and now I speak up. I red pill my family, I red pill my friends, and I support redpillliving.com. Red Pill Living has real health products that support longevity, vitality, and detoxification against the deep state attacks on your health. It's redpillliving.com. Wake up, stand up, speak up.
In the last episode of Wild Consumptions, we left off with an overview of the first 10 amendments form of the Bill of Rights. Today, we're going to dive into the very first of the Bill of Rights, and this begins with freedom of religion, speech, press, assembly, and petition. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. This is based on the Establishment Clause. Here is the interpretation by Marcy A. Hamilton, written by Marcy A. Hamilton and Michael McConnell. America's early settlers came from a variety of religious backgrounds. Puritans predominated in New England. Anglicans predominated in the South. Quakers and Lutherans flocked especially to Pennsylvania. Roman Catholics settled mostly in Maryland. Presbyterians were most numerous in the Middle Colonies, and there were Jewish congregations in 5 cities. During colonial times, the Church of England was established by law in all of the southern colonies, while localized Puritan or Congregationalist establishments held sway in most New England states. In those colonies, clergy were appointed and disciplined by colonial authorities, and colonists were required to pay religious taxes and often to attend church services. Dissenters were often punished for preaching without a license or refusing to pay taxes to a church they disagreed with. Delaware, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, and much of New York had no established church. After independence, there was widespread agreement that there should be no nationally established church. The Establishment Clause of the First Amendment, principally authored by James Madison, reflects this consensus. The language of the Establishment Clause itself applies only to the federal government. Congress shall pass no law respecting an establishment of religion. All states disestablished religion by 1833, and in the 1940s, the Supreme Court held that disestablishment applies to state governments through the 14th Amendment. Virtually all jurists agree that it would violate the Establishment Clause for the government to compel attendance or financial support of a religious institution as such, for the governments to interfere with the religious organization's selection of clergy or religious doctrine, for religious organizations or figures acting in a religious capacity to exercise governmental power, or for the government to extend benefits to some religious entities and not others without adequate secular justification. Beyond that, the meaning of the amendment is often hotly contested, and establishment cases in the Supreme Court often lead to 5-4 splits. The vast majority of Establishment Clause cases have fallen in 4 areas: monetary aid to religious education or other social welfare activities conducted by religious institutions, government-sponsored prayer, accommodation of religious dissenters from generally applicable laws, and government-owned or sponsored religious symbols. Scholars have long debated between 2 opposing interpretations of the Establishment Clause as it applies to government funding. One, that the government must be neutral between religious and non-religious institutions that provide education or other social services. Or 2, that no taxpayer funds should be given to religious institutions if they might be used to communicate religious doctrine. Initially, the court tended toward the first interpretation. In the 1970s and 1980s, the court shifted to the second interpretation, and more recently, the court has decisively moved back to the first idea. Hundreds of federal, state, and local laws exempt or accommodate religious believers or institutions from otherwise neutral, generally applicable laws for whom compliance would conflict with religiously motivated conduct. Examples include military draft exemptions, kosher or halal meals for prisoners, medical neglect exemptions for parents who do not believe in medical treatment for their ill children, exemptions from some anti-discrimination laws or religious entities, military headgear requirements, and exemptions for the sacramental use of certain drugs. The Supreme Court has addressed very few of these exemptions. While the court held that a state sales tax exemption limited to religious publications was unconstitutional, it unanimously upheld the exemption of religious organizations from prohibitions or on employment discrimination from ministers. 2 federal laws, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act and the Religious Land Use Act and Institutionalized Persons Act, provide broad-based statutory accommodations for religious practice where it conflicts with federal and certain state and local laws. A unanimous court upheld this approach for prisoners against a claim that granting religious accommodations violates the Establishment Clause, reasoning that Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act alleviates exceptional government-created burdens on private religious exercise in prisons. And there's a case on that, the Cutter v. Wilkinson of 2005. The court in Cutter left open the question whether such a regime applied to land use is constitutional, and it also left open the possibility that even some applications in prisons may be unconstitutional if they are not even-handed among religions or impose too extreme a burden on non-believers. The court's recent 5-4 decision in Burwell v. Hobby Lobby stores of 2014, holding that Religious Freedom Restoration Act exempts for-profit employers from paying for insurance coverage of contraceptive drugs that they believe are abortion-inducing, has reinvigorated the debate over such laws. The cases involving governmental displays of religious symbols, such as 10 Commandment displays in public school classrooms, courthouses, or public parks, nativity scenes in courthouses and shopping districts, or crosses on public land, have generated much debate. The most prominent approach in more recent cases is called the Endorsement Act test, and it asks whether a reasonable observer acquainted with the full context would regard the display as the government endorsing a religion, and therefore sending a message of disenfranchisement to other believers and non-believers. The court's decisions in this arena are often closely divided. They also illustrate that the court has declined to take a rigid, absolutist view of the separation of church and state. In Lynch versus Donnelly of 1984, the court allowed a display of a nativity scene surrounded by other holiday decorations in the heart of a shopping district, stating that it engenders a friendly community spirit of goodwill in keeping with the season. But in County of Allegheny versus American Civil Liberties Union of 1989, a different majority of justices held that the display of a nativity scene by itself at the top of the grand stairway in a courthouse violated the Establishment Clause because it was indisputably religious, indeed sectarian. In McCreary County versus American Civil Liberties of 2005, the court held that a prominent display of the Ten Commandments at the county courthouse, which was preceded by an official's description of the Ten Commandments as the embodiment of ethics in Christ, was a religious display that was unconstitutional. The same day, it upheld the Ten Commandments monument, which was donated by a secular organization dedicated to reducing juvenile delinquency and surrounded by other monuments on the spacious State House grounds. Van Orden versus Perry, 2005. Only one justice was in the majority in both cases. More broadly, the Establishment Clause provides a legal framework for resolving disagreements about the public role of religion in our increasingly pluralistic republic. This concludes the Establishment Clause of the first of the Bill of Rights. Make sure to visit National Liberty Alliance at nationallibertyalliance.org for a full array of resources on how you can protect yourself and your family from a tyrannical government.